Do you ever feel alone? Or have you ever had that moment where you're surrounded by people, but you feel lonely? When we're going through life, and especially during times of struggle, we can feel like we are doing life alone, even when others are around. And so, how do we begin to challenge that feeling? How do we begin to cut through it in ways that help us know that we are absolutely not alone? So for today, I've got a couple of verses out of the book of the letter to the Philippians, written by Paul. And we may think, as Paul is addressing, he is trying to encourage others about don't feel alone. And we may think, well, that's easy for you to say. But it's important to know that he was writing this while in prison, while he was separated from others. And so it gives kind of this interesting perspective of how he's engaging in conversation with others as it challenges our own understanding of feeling alone, our own experience of feeling lonely. And so Philippians 1 verses 3 through 5. I thank my God every time I mention you in my prayers. I'm thankful for all of you every time I pray, and it's always a prayer full of joy. I'm glad because of the way you have been my partners in ministry of the gospel from the time you first believed it until now. All right, so right there from the very beginning, he goes, hey, I acknowledge you in my prayers to those that he's writing to. And to think about that prayer, that conversation with God, that connection with God of bringing others into it. And he's doing it in such a way that he is grateful. So for us, thinking through who are we grateful for in our lives, like every day, running through that list of people in our lives that we are absolutely grateful for. And then having that prayer, having those thoughts centered around how can we lift others up and pray for them to experience joy. Think about that. So often we think of God help us, or we think of it in terms of we pray for others when we perceive that there is a need. But here, God is all about being in every aspect of our lives. And Paul is pointing out how we can pray for others to experience joy, even though we may not know what's going on in their lives. And then he does something else. I'm glad because of the way you have been my partners in the ministry of the gospel from the time you first believed it until now. So here he moves talking about gratitude and joy. And then he goes into about being glad, happy about how they have partnered with him in this work of sharing the gospel. And that is sharing the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, the love, forgiveness, compassion, that the whole thing about Jesus' teachings, that they're sharing that with others to build one another up. And so for Paul, it's changed his life, so he wants other lives to be changed by that message of love and forgiveness, that message of mercy and peace. And so here we get a sense of how Paul is acknowledging those he works alongside. And so often when we think about, well, who works with me? We think of it in terms of a job, right? Employment. But here, to begin to broaden that out of going, wait a minute, who do I invite in to do good things with? To do good for others? Because that's what Paul is doing. The partners he has in the ministry is they're trying to do good for others. And so to think about that, how do I invite someone else, and who invites me into a space of, you know what, we're going to go down and we're going to go help others. And maybe it's with another nonprofit, but maybe it's even in simple terms of going, wait a minute, who do I ask to say, you know what, I'm going to try to be kind to others today. Will you join me in that? So a common goal. And so when we are feeling lonely, when we feel all alone in our struggles, we get these ways of going, you know what, we're going to push against that message. We're going to push against it with who we're praying for, who we are grateful for in life, how we pray for others to experience joy. So kind of a refocusing, but then also to acknowledge who are we inviting into our lives to go do good things with, to go do good for others. Who do we partner with in that? And so my hope is that this passage just gives a little moment for you to dig in of how do I deal when I feel that I am alone or that I'm lonely, even when surrounded by others. Have a good one.